vision. We had to tear down an old log house in order to do this phase. But when we built that, we knew we wanted to do something like this here. We just didn't know what it was going to look like. And through that whole process, we've sort of been learning and growing in construction and our knowledge of construction and our like what we want out of a house and all that sort of stuff. So this is sort of a culmination of all that stuff. So the parameters that we were looking at here were that we wanted to take advantage of the site to the best of our ability on an infill site. So we do actually have some views. We live on a very noisy corner with a lot of light coming in and a lot of loud trucks and plows and whatnot going on, so we wanted to insulate ourselves from that as much as possible. We didn't want to impose too much on our neighbors with a great big monster house, so we tried to hedge that a little bit as best we could. We're uphill from them. So one of the strategies that we used to mitigate that is we built the house into the slope. The other consideration in that was that since I'm building it, the lower I make the house, the easier it is for me to build, and I don't want to be 35 feet in the air anymore. So we tried to work with all those parameters, and this is sort of what came out of it. Eric has been instrumental. He's the architect here, and like bringing this off. We had an idea, and the guy's a master. So beyond that, the considerations obviously are the overall cost profile. We have a limited amount that we can spend, and it's got to fit within that. But it's also got to meet. We insist that it has certain energy efficient standards that it meets, and current building standards that it meets, as well as the aesthetic ones that you see. So the exterior foam, I don't know, when you walked in the front door, you saw a little, next to the front door, there was foam nailed to the wall with little wood slats on it. That's called continuous exterior insulation. And that's part of a comprehensive strategy to upgrade the insulation in the house and make it resilient to any kind of mold or moisture issues, make the overall house more comfortable. So that was obviously one of the requirements for us is that cost ratio. How do we actually get a really high performing house at a price that we can do? And that's a constructible option for me as the builder. So I guess that hits most of those points. The other thing that is really important to keep in mind is that we feel by building a more aesthetically pleasing house that over the life of the house that people are going to be more inclined to want to take care of the house more and be less inclined to want to tear it down or remodel it or do anything like that. And we feel like that's a highly sustainable feature. It's not a throwaway house. It's a house that's designed to last for a long time. So all the components, all the things that go into the house are thought out toward that end. So yeah, I mean, I think that's probably one of the things in sustainability that sort of gets lost, that you don't really hear people talking about. The other thing is social equity. Are you putting poisonous things in your house that have to be manufactured in remote locations that people are getting sick from dealing with? Spray foam, exterior foam is just one of those things right now in our society cycle that are hard to avoid unless you're willing to spend a lot more money. And in our case, we weren't really able to do that. So we tried to hit the sweet spot, I guess, is kind of one of the main themes, is that we're trying to achieve a lot of things in a way that we can afford.
You've emitted spray foam from the inside of the building.
We have, yeah.
To a large degree, right?
To a large degree. There's certain areas that necessitate it. The underside of that deck is actually living space. There's a bumped out area on the front there that's actually exterior floor space underneath that needs to get spray foam, and that back area over there. The only way to insulate those adequately is to do spray polyurethane foam.
How we insulate the rest of it?
This is all going to be blown in fiberglass, like loose fiberglass insulation. What they do is they net the walls, and then they pierce the netting and blow they blow the insulation in. The ceiling is all gonna get like ventilation in the ceiling. You can see air, light coming up through. So we put a baffle in to allow air to flow between the insulation and the plywood, and it vents through a ridge vent. Same thing over here, this was all designed so we can get cross ventilation and ventilation up from the end. That comes up through here and up through there. And that if you have moisture, a leak in your roof or anything like that happening, and it wets materials, the ventilation allows that wetting to dry out. So you're not gonna rot your structure and your ceiling. So the other thing that is really important to know is that we did some energy modeling on this while we were designing it. And it informed what we decided to do for windows and where we decided to put the windows. And we opted to go with the triple glazing on most of our windows. And they have an insulating value of approximately R5. A conventional dual glazed window is going to be about an R3. And what we found when we did the model is that it was about a 5,000 BTU per hour difference from one to the other. And if you look at a 24-hour cycle at 10 below zero, it's 125,000 BTUs. So it makes a difference. It doesn't seem like R2 would make a big difference. And so we felt like at a house like this, really, it's a big upgrade in cost to do that. But we felt like it necessitated it, so we did that. We did in a couple areas hedge that, in a couple rooms, if you look around, we do have some dual pane windows where we thought we weren't gonna have a huge energy penalty by putting a little less expensive window in there. So that was sort of the strategy with windows. We picked a real high quality manufacturer. You can get a window like this that is maybe a little more cheaply made, that's at a lower price point, but we didn't feel like we wanted to mess around with that. I don't want to be replacing windows in 10 years. The other thing that we did is we, along with all the insulation that you see on the outside, we have 2 layers of insulation under the concrete slab downstairs. That's twice as much as is typical in our construction market. And that was a big factor in like the overall energy load on the house too. And so, and speaking about the overall heat load, they call it the heat loss of a house. So the model said that at 10 below, this house will have a heat loss of around 30,000 BTUs. If I would have gone with an even higher grade window, I could have got it down to like 26. But what that came out to at like in terms of a gas energy cost at the end of the year was about $600 a year to $650 a year, which we felt was pretty good for a house of this size. And I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll be able to perform better than that. And what I've seen in the past is that the models tend to underestimate how well a building will perform if the building is well constructed. So the only other thing that probably is most relevant to you is that we really wanted to integrate. This came from a 1800s era barn that we deconstructed in another phase of our life and hanging on to and hoping to actually incorporate in a building at some point. And we didn't really want it to be like an overdone barn beam house. We just wanted to incorporate some features and pick the best timbers that we had. So we have 2 different kinds of wood. That's a hickory or something like that, and this is oak, white oak. And it sort of just is an artistic, like, hopefully the whole thing comes together as sort of a barn-like space or like a loft-like space. Where we have a lot of light coming in, so we feel like uplifted on gray days in the middle of the winter when you're ready for it to be over with. And we have the public space upstairs that you're free to move around in. We hope to provide like some places where people can get off by themselves. living in a little bitty house like that with 2 kids, there's no opportunity to get away from the chaos. And you really yearn for an opportunity just to have a little bit of your own space. So I think we're gonna hit that pretty well with this. And the bedrooms downstairs are gonna be real quiet and private so that we don't have to hear snow plows in the night in the middle of the winter, or you know, we're a little bit insulated from the loud motorcycles and the loud mufflers that come up and down 13th Street. It's a raceway. It's the place where you crack the throttle, believe it or not. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think those kind of hit the bullet points. I can talk some more technical stuff if anybody's interested in that. I had some other ideas about exterior insulation that I could talk about, or anything that anybody wants to hear.
Or if Eric wants to add anything.
I think Scott did a pretty good job of capturing that, but Scott did bring to the table many years of experience in trying to achieve sound green building practices, and that was helpful and enjoyable for myself to have a builder that's that actively engaged in the process of trying to do the right thing in terms of energy efficiency. And also the scale of the house is something I like. It's not excessively large. It's very livable. And urban infill is pretty tough. You have a lot of view corridors that have to be very carefully considered, and you can't always hit it. And you know, you can only do so much to imagine it during the conception phase. But and some things do change. We did change some windows during framing, right?
Yeah, we added that window right there, actually.
Yeah.
I think we moved, I don't remember what, we might have had that one, might have been in the middle of the wall and we shifted it over. I can't remember, but we did end up adding that window.
And some got taken away, they got put
Yeah.
back in, and you know, it was it's one of those things you go through to hit a budget also, and also downscale certain windows based upon, you
That's
know,
the neighbor's
actually-
bedroom right across there,
right.
so we didn't feel like we needed to like have a good view.
right, but it's still nice to have windows in the kitchen. You know, but you want to open the house towards that side, so that's how in the design phase. So then the kitchen sort of shuffles its way into this portion of the building because that's the side you don't really want to look at, but you still want some windows. So how do you deal with that? So those are some of the things that come into play.
We get a lot of morning sun, and in the summer the sun's coming up right over there, and in the winter it's coming up right there. And it's at, you know, early in the morning, it's coming in at a real low angle. So one thing we learned in that house is that if I'm sitting at my table, if it's too bright, I gotta pull a shade. So we wanted to get the light in, but not have it kill us. So we feel like we can sit at our table and the light's coming in and it's not blinding us.
I'd say that's also a pretty big advantage in that Scott lived on the site for a good long while. I mean, most designers and homeowners don't usually get the benefit of that level of experience. I mean, you can only visit a construction site so many times prior to the design, but that was real-time info that was super helpful in terms of the layout of the space.
We anticipate at some point that there will be another house over here, whether it's our house or somebody else's house. And so that was kind of a nod to that too, was like, how do I carve out a little bit of privacy in a place where there's a lot of eyeballs? So that's kind of a nod to that too. It's a little modern takeoff on, you know, it's more contemporary versus the more sort of like traditional sort of a look over here. So it was all kind of put in the pot together.
And then since this is, I think it's pretty important to mention that you've only filled one dumpster so far. You've actually played a pretty active role in diverting waste from the landfill.
That's actually important that that's on here.
And I took all the offcuts to heat my space. I have a wood stove. So all the scrap, I took 2 van loads worth of scrap out of here. And then they're recycling cardboard. I mean, I see projects around town that fill 12 of those things and send it to the landfill. So it's pretty refreshing to see one dumpster load thus far, right?
Well, I mean, we recycle everything that we can. Any kind of metal scrap goes to the metal bin. Any kind of recyclable cardboard goes into the cardboard recycling on a weekly You gotta be diligent about it because people don't think about it. They just throw it in the dumpster, all the pop cans and the bottles. But really, a lot of it's, every one of these windows was a plywood cutout. In most projects, they just go into the dumpster. If you look on the side of my house, you see a bunch of plywood cutoffs. I use those continuously throughout the construction project in various phases. So if I threw that all out as I'm getting rid of it, I'd have to buy 10 new sheets of plywood to do all the little things that need to happen, like up on that ceiling up there. That's actually an air sealing detail. So, you know, you use that stuff, you have to pay attention to it, and you have to put it in a place where it's accessible and you know it's there in order to utilize it. So we just put a lot of attention into that.
It does take a little bit more time, but you weren't really inefficient in the construction of this house at all.